Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Podcasts, the series, Part 2, How to Listen to a Podcast. I'm Huey Poplock. This is Part 2 of 3. The problem is how podcast apps are often free, or at least have decent free versions, so there's no reason that you can't try several and see what you think are the best podcast apps for iPhone or Android, because podcasts are everywhere these days, and there are so many topics to choose from. In recent years, the quality has risen dramatically as the podcasting space has grown up. Many people still can't quite figure out how to listen to a podcast, though, and I'm going to try to help you. Podcast on smartphones, Apple iOS, Androids, and then there are some that are cross-platform. Like browsers, you need an app to listen to podcasts. There are different podcasts for different platforms. There are some that are iOS only, there are some that are Android only, and then there are some that are cross-platform that can be used on either and Windows or a Mac. Here are some of the more popular titles. The number of podcasts listened to last week, you can see people listened to 6 to 10 were 19%, and 11 or more were another 19%, and 4 or 5 were 21%. So just in 4 or above are well over 50%. Podcast players on Apple. These are just some of the players, and you get the app from the App Store on an Apple iOS device. There is also an Apple Podcasts app built into your iOS device. On my Apple iOS iPad, here are some of the podcast players that I use: iHeart Radio, podcasts from Apple, Stitcher, and then TuneIn Radio and Spotify. Podcast player apps on Android. There are about 250 podcast players on the Google Play Store. Here are some of them. And again, here are some of the smartphone apps to play podcasts on your Android device, including Google's own Google Podcasts. So what you need to learn: how to listen to podcast shows, use the playback controls, follow or unfollow podcast shows, play episodes in order or play the newest episode first, download podcast episodes, delete podcast episodes, and mark a podcast episode as played. Each of the apps have their own way of doing each of these, so to go through each one of them, we'd be here a long time. But I am going to do a demo and show some of these items. So let's take a look at the demo. Let's take a look at the podcast players on my iPad. I use Stitcher the most, so let's take a look at it first. When it opens, you'll see that it shows episodes of podcasts that I've listened to, maybe not all of them. And then you can see that it's downloading some new ones. It's waiting to go get some more. As I scroll down, you can see, and scroll up, you can see there are little arrows to the right. And if there's a line underneath it, that line indicates how much I've already listened to of that podcast and how far into it that I've watched it. We'll click on one of them, and you'll see that it shows some information put on there by the podcast makers. And there can be links, there can be information, and there could be nothing. Now, when we click on Discover at the bottom, you can see that I can go and find other podcasts to add to my list, and I can follow or not follow. I can just listen to a podcast from a series and then decide whether I want to follow them or not and have them added to the list. When I decide on one, I can take a look at it, see some of the articles. I clicked on follow, and so now I am following cast. So each time there is a new episode, it will be added to my list. Down at the bottom are my controls. You can see I can move ahead within any particular podcast. I can go back 15 seconds by clicking that. I can go ahead 30 seconds by clicking the other. And I can go to settings. We're now on our iPad, and we're going to take a look at the Apple Podcast app. These are topics that you can choose for your podcast to listen to. I'm going to choose the Washington Post, and I am going to subscribe to it. It's now subscribed. And now it'll show me some information about it, and then what the recent episodes are. I can click plus next to it. It then downloads it, and I can listen to those. Going back to news. And we can see what's recently updated in my library. You can see the various topics under sports. You can choose the sport that you're interested in. Find weekly fan favorites, hear from the pros, sports and culture, more sports, and you can choose again your favorite sport and find more information. So here under football, you can see if you're a football fan, you might be able to find a podcast on your favorite team, your favorite college team, your favorite pro team. I like to listen to iHeart Radio for radio stations, but I also can use it and do for some podcasts. One of the things I do, if you look at the bottom, I listen to WDBO in Orlando in the morning because they have what I feel is a very good news program from about 5 in the morning till about 9. It's actual news. And there are settings in the iHeart Radio program. And a lot of the radio stations and TV stars have their own podcasts, and a lot of them are on iHeart. And there's two there. Joel Osteen. I will click on follow him. And Mark Levin, I'll mark that as follow. Or are those two different? So I'm following both of them now. And then I'm going to unfollow Mark Levin just to show you, you can unfollow anyone at any time on any of these podcast programs. So now I've unfollowed him. And so it no longer will download and add his podcasts to the list of ones that I haven't seen. And it will not delete ones I've already downloaded. I will have to do those manually. But you can see there's a whole bunch of podcasts that I've downloaded. May not have been things that I was interested in. So it'll help me choose as well. This has been Podcast, the series, part 2, How to Listen to a Podcast.